Good morning. Welcome to Future of IT Services. My name is Alex, and I am the Manager of Programs and Digital Experience at NC Tech. With over 700 organizational members and 250,000 tech employees represented, NC Tech is the leading association for the tech sector in North Carolina, as well as the unifying voice for the North Carolina's thriving tech sector. This session is a part of our virtual workshop programming. Please feel free to check the NC Tech events calendar for any additional programming coming up. It's nctech.org. I'm super excited for this panel today. We have a great response from our network for this panel. The session will be recorded, with the recording being sent out to all registrants when the session concludes. If you have a question during the session today, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. This will get to the questions at the end. Well, perhaps maybe like 10 or 15 minutes at the end. Special thanks to Silver Tree Consulting and Services for sponsoring this virtual workshop today. Based in Raleigh, Silver Tree focuses on solving tech and data challenges mid-market companies face with tailor-fit services to increase efficiency and lower costs. Now I'll hand it over to Tony Joy, President of Silver Tree, who will be moderating our discussion today.
Great. Thank you, Alex, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time and having the interest in the future of IT services. I am president at Silver Tree. I've been there for a number of years now. And I will shortly offer our three panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves, but just want to remind everybody why we're here. I think you all know that the role of IT is very much shifting from managing technology to managing business transformation, increasingly requiring ownership of all aspects of technology stack that enable you with your partners to optimize business processes. New roles introduced, chief digital officers, chief transformation officers, just underlines the fact that IT has to move from simply managing technology to an organization that accelerates and manages to business services performance, leading some of the performance improvements right across the business, managing services end to end, regardless of how they're provided or by whom they're provided. And there are some sort of key drivers to that. Well, we'll get to those drivers in a minute and start the conversation, but let me open up to our three partners here today, our panelists. So first, David Wilson of ServiceNow. David, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thanks, Tony. I'm David Wilson, Global Area Vice President of our Partner Solution Consulting organization. I've been with ServiceNow for just under 10 years. Prior to that, I've got about 20 years of experience in the IT managed services space across many different roles and functions.
Thank you, David. And we have Brian Amaro with us from ScienceLogic. Brian, would you say a few words?
Yeah, thank you, Tony. I'm Brian Amaro. I'm the Global VP of Advisory Services at ScienceLogic. I'm actually responsible for enabling the digital blueprint to AI ops within ScienceLogic organization. And I was actually a customer of ScienceLogic before I joined them in 2017. I actually worked for the Kellogg Company. I ran their global monitoring platform across 390 locations with over 35,000 people involved, monitoring the most critical thing Kellogg produced. And a lot of people think it's cornflakes or frosted flakes, but it's actually the Kellogg Connect website. It's the most important thing to Kellogg. So proud to do that for them.
Thank you, Brian. Last but not least, Richard Ricks, the CEO and founder of Silver Tree Consulting and Services.
Well, as Tony says, Richard Ricks, the founder and CEO of Silver Tree. At Silver Tree, we're all about enabling our mid-market clients' IT operations transformation. And my background is I've run a very large managed service organization, and I work with CIOs continuously in enabling their transformation. We're all about understanding their challenges and moving their organization and their technology footprint forward to enable the business transformation. So we look forward to the discussion today.
Right. Well, thank you each of you for your intros. I think I think we'll have a fruitful discussion today on the market drivers that shift the role of IT services and hopefully give you and the audience some pointers. So if we think about the 5 key market drivers, and I think any analyst group that you may subscribe to will highlight these as the main drivers of the change we touched on just a little bit earlier. Externalization of the cloud, software as a service, big servers and mainframes moving to the cloud, which brings fundamental shift to your talent pool and IT's responsibility within the organization, change of operation, change of ways of working. No surprise, AI is up there, a huge driving force, shift in requirements for talent and tech, shift in needs and requests from the organization and what they can get from AI. And they all drive different support models, systems, and then, of course, the underlying data. And, of course, being tolerant and avoiding those risks that you have in using AI around bias, et cetera. So big driver, AI with data underpinning it. And then, of course, companies aren't companies without IT, and some companies are only a company because of IT. It's no longer the business of IT. The business is IT, with services running throughout, right out to IoT devices. So IT is the fabric of their business. So that drives a different way of managing and blurs the lines totally between IT and business partners. The digital workplace remains increasingly important. COVID highlighted the differences in ways of working, but it's critical, and it's the end users, the integration point of all the services that precede it. You used to look at it at just, at the end there and look at it separately, but if you think about it, it is only as strong as the weakest link in the chain. The remote aspect drives higher order requirements around security and availability, and not just at the end point, but the performance is critical to the employee experience and productivity and engagement. More and more, we hear about digital workplace driving employee engagement and thus productivity and experience. And of course, last but not least, security must not just be at the perimeter, but factored into every aspect of the IT infrastructure, and drives the administration and maintenance of IT environments. Security has to be at the middle of policy, administration, and management. So there are some highlights there of the things that we see and hear driving many of the changes. That changes how IT is managed and how service providers, in fact, help too. So let's now start to introduce our partners here, our panelists. I'll start with Brian. Brian, how do you see these market drivers impacting IT services?
So thanks, Tony, for asking that question, because in the world of AI today, it goes back to the old methodologies. Getting the basics right is really key to making it work for you. Okay, think of it like building blocks, right? You've got applications, platforms, data handling, all the new AI stuff, infrastructure, and security, right? But one thing folks tend to forget about is how all these pieces actually fit together, especially when it comes to security. Each layer plays a very pivotal role in ensuring the smooth functioning and effectiveness of AI-driven operations. Of course, sure, everybody talks about collecting loads of data, right? But it's not much use unless you understand what it means in context. Think of it this way. It's like having a bunch of puzzle pieces without knowing what the picture is supposed to look like. So understanding the context, the situational awareness surrounding the data is essential for really deriving those meaningful insights and actionable intelligence. To really get a handle on what's going on, you need to take a different approach to what we're basically used to as human beings with infrastructure, right? You need to take a service-centric approach and throw security in the mix. No more is security that outlier. Really, security has to get involved with everything else from a service-centric approach. It's just not about keeping your apps running smoothly anymore. This approach goes far beyond merely monitoring application performance with AI. It extends to assessing the overall health and identifying potential risks within the underlying infrastructure and how the corporation is actually governed and managed from an IT perspective. By making security part of a bigger picture, you can actually spot problems before they become disasters. And we see those disasters in the media all the time still today, right? Because, I mean, let's face it, a security breach can mess up more than just one application, right? It can take down your whole operation. So as we move forward, the name of the game is blending AI with IT operations and security in a way that makes sense for everyone involved. The convergence of a service-centric model with robust security measures promises really to enhance operational efficiency, reduce risks, and ensure the seamless functioning of critical business processes in an increasingly complex digital landscape. Situational awareness needs to be the focus, not just IT infrastructure itself.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. I'm going to switch over to David, see what your perspective is. We have externalization, AI, blurring of the lines. What are your thoughts, David?
Yeah, I love the picture that Brian just put in our minds around the puzzle pieces, right? I think those puzzle pieces are actually each of these driving forces that are interconnected, because these 5 items ultimately are interweaving of themselves, that they're driving individual forces, but they're interconnected at the end of the day. What we see at ServiceNow, on the externalization of IT, just recently, ISG released their latest market analysis, and 2023 was the best year ever for managed services. Why is that? Well, organizations are increasingly turning to service providers not to just outsource or out-task, right? They're looking to gain access to specialized resources and skills, along with all the new technologies that are in the marketplace. This enables those organizations to reduce costs, but also stay focused on their core business. And you talked about that earlier, Tony, around, IT is no longer just keeping the lights on. IT is becoming increasingly tied to the business. And this is why. AI initiatives, like we'll talk a lot about AI today. Every company is expected to have an AI strategy, right? AI is only as powerful as the platform it's built on. Organizations need to build and establish a strong data foundation. And Brian hit on that around data and security. And that has to interweave itself around your AI strategy. And ultimately deliver engaging experiences, leveraging all of those underpinning AI capabilities, not just externally, but also internally within your organizations. Whether you're a service provider or whether you're an enterprise organization, AI will ultimately drive both internal and external engagements. IT increasingly is the business. I love that, because ultimately CIOs, CTOs, CXOs, and even chief security officers, as I engage with them, especially in our partner ecosystem, they're there ultimately now being the enabler of the business. They're not thinking about just keeping the lights on. They're trying to understand, how do I leverage the best of breed technologies like ServiceNow, like ScienceLogic, and deploy those in a way that can help drive business expansion. They're no longer looking at just a P&L and trying to be a cost. They're also now trying to drive revenue as it relates to those IT services. So let me pause there, Tony, and I'll let you jump on to the next.
Yeah, well, thank you, David. Good thoughts. Richard, you've been the CIO. You've run large managed services. You're running a business. You must have some thoughts on all of these, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think we all know that the externalization of IT services is really enabling the bringing together of the business and IT like never before. And as David and Brian spoke earlier, we see the evolution of IT services to be more of a business service management construct, where the performance of IT services is not managed by the performance of an IT tower, but the performance of how the service is being provided to the end user, providing a business function. And so we actually see that the managed service providers are going to, like ourselves, need to move away from the traditional tower-based SLA performance management to more of a business service management construct, where we're managing the performance as the end user consumes that through the business process technology. What that allows is the CIO to not only become the operational leader for IT, which more and more is being externalized, but to drive the transformation of the business using information technology. We also see the IT as just another business function within and business process within the enterprise. With that, we feel that too long has the data that's been created in the IT domain been made available only in a tower-based engagement. And as we think about AI and the future of IT services, the ability to bring all of those insights that have traditionally been locked away in individual tower-based managed services to an integrated data fabric that allows AI to execute on that is going to drive a higher level of productivity and automation. We actually believe, and we've done a lot of research with various partners such as Brian and David, that 50 to 70% of the traditional tasks that an IT services organization within an enterprise or through an MSP can be automated over time. And that is all driven by the digital fuel that is data, right? Data is the digital fuel. And what that will require is the IT organization and the managed services provider to focus as much time and energy on managing the data that is being generated from the various platforms that are being used as it does to managing the service. As a matter of fact, a good friend of ours, the CEO of Everest, published a white paper in Forbes that said, when you think about BPO services, think more about the platform than you do about the service provider, because a platform will either constrain or enable the evolution of IT services of your organization. Clearly, we have to wrapper all of this from the end point all the way back through the organization to the application layer in a zero trust mindset, given the advent of AI not only allows the efficiency and productivity of the IT organizations, but the bad guys have access to that technology. So to combat the bad guys, we have to also take advantage of AI technology in the security domain. As Brian indicated, the visibility of everything that's going on within your domain allows you to be more proactive, not only in your service quality, but also in how you address potential risk in security. And so we see companies like Horizon 3 AI that is driving a really focused level on making it easy for organizations to continuously run penetration tests and things of that sort in a very cost-effective way to be key to the evolution of security. And hey, at the end of the day, it's all about the productivity of the end user. It's all about that digital workplace and that experience of that end user through the digital workplace that could be anywhere at any time around the world, and observing that productivity and understanding how everything we do in the externalization of IT and the services we provide and the data that we manage enables that digital workplace to be productive is key to a managed services provider and to the IT services organization within an enterprise. That's my comments, Tony. Back to you.
Thank you, Richard. Well, gentlemen, you have a very broad view of small, medium, and even large enterprises, and you see the evolution that's going on. How, Brian, do you see corporations reinventing their operations management?
Tony, that's a big question, right? And Richard kind of touched on that as well. When we talk about reinventing operations management for companies, the first thing that comes to mind is, why do we even need to do that, right? Well, you have to really kind of dig deep into your soul, right? But when it boils down to something called observability ecosystem. The observability ecosystem is about understanding exactly how everything fits together in our environments, right? Now, whether you're using OpenTelemetry, Jaeger, Prometheus, or whatever else you use to gather data, and to reiterate a little bit more on what Richard stated, it's all about gathering that data and making sense of it. Just because you have these, different tools in the environment doesn't mean that all the data is actually culminating into one source. Now, we've got these cool platforms like ScienceLogic and ServiceNow that can help us do just that. But the real question is, how do we bring all these pieces together to get the insights we need? And how do we make sure these insights lead us to solving problems before they even happen? And let's be real about IT here, in the way, in the world it exists as today, right? Before AI and all this hoopla going on right now with media and how AI is going to eliminate everything in the world, all our work, right? comes down to who really wants to deal with problems all the time, right? Wouldn't it be awesome if we could actually just automate most of it? I mean, think about that, right? That's where AI actually comes in, guys, right? We're talking about moving away from just reacting to issues to actually predicting and preventing disasters, not replacing people, but predicting and preventing disasters, right? Unfortunately, it's easier said than done. You can't just press the easy button, right? So there's this massive elephant in the room whenever I talk to CIOs or even operations individuals working the day-to-day grind, right? Adoption. We're all excited about that new tech until it gets too complicated. Anybody ever heard of Everett Rogers? He talked about this funny theory called the diffusion of innovation back in the 1960s. What's not so funny is that human nature actually hasn't changed in 6 decades. People love new stuff until it becomes a headache, and that's where we're at. And when it becomes a headache, they don't want to work on it anymore. It's called a chasm of technology, right? We say, well, I need a new iPhone. Well, I need a new Android phone. Well, Android doesn't work for me anymore. I need a new laptop. I need a new tablet. All this stuff. I need something new. Well, that technology, what we're not realizing is we're jumping into a chasm to try to have technology solve the problem for us, when in all reality, it's people that are going to solve the problem. And that's where we're at with AI and observability. And we're still figuring that out, right? So how do we move forward? Well, it's all about partnerships and having a solid data strategy. Instead of sweating the small stuff like CPU usage, let's focus on the bigger picture, right? The health and risk of our services. As I stated in the prior question I had, right? That's where the real value lies, is in the service-centric approach. And yeah, AI is a big part of it, but let's not rush it, right? And we need to take a step-by-step foundational approach to this to build the basics and constantly reevaluate our approach as we march through this AI journey, right? Reinventing operations management isn't just about embracing new tech. We can all buy new tech. Yeah, I want a new Ferrari. I want a new Lamborghini. I want this. But what are you really trying to achieve? It's about taking a fresh approach to how we actually do things. By working together and staying open to new ideas, we can truly revolutionize the way we run our operations and redefine the old ways that a 1960s theorist actually came up with that still applies today, and reinvent actually how we're adopting the platforms today.
But thanks, Brian. I didn't think you were old enough to read a book in 1960, but good to I know, Richard, do you have any thoughts on how MSPs, managed service providers, have to adapt?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that not only MSPs, but even the IT or organizations within the enterprise need to think about. I think with the new technological platforms such as ServiceNow and ScienceLogic, we're experimenting with a concept called the Enterprise Operations Center. So if you bring together through your data fabric and data architecture all the various insights that are available, and drive a proactive mindset to take advantage of that operationally, you've got to be able to have an organization that looks at it and understands and interprets that data in a holistic fashion. And so what we're seeing is the skill sets still being required in the specialist area, but a higher order skill set needs to emerge where people are looking at the performance of the environment end to end and at the enterprise level and the correlation of that performance. So the data that enables that, we find, is a key component of what MSPs and IT organizations, as I said earlier, need to focus on, because it's the digital fuel. It drives all the proactivity that Brian has talked about. Without that data and data being turned into insights, it's just data. So the challenge for an MSP or an IT organization is, how do you harness all that to create that comprehensive view? We also think that the MSPs need to think about how they approach, and we are one, so how we approach service level management and looking at how do we simplify the consumption of services such that it's more predictable for our clients, as well as how do we transition from an SLA based upon a technology stack, the traditional way, to SLAs based upon a business service being managed end to end. And so the correlation of all the elements in the infrastructure and application portfolio, therefore reflected in data, is key to being able to manage that business service level performance. I'm going to end this comment on this. We had a CIO summit last April. We brought in 10 CIOs from 50 million to 6.5 billion. There were three things that came from that summit across the board. One, every CIO wants to move to an as-a-service model and have predictable consumption, whether it's up or down. They want to be able to budget and predict their cost structure. It's been the desire, and it's what is driving as-a-service model, and that flexibility to move up and down. Secondly, when I asked them, did they see the nirvana of IT being business service management? By the way, we even had Gartner at this summit. And the Gartner analyst spoke up and said, I've been looking for MSPs to move from the traditional tower-based approach to the business service management approach for 20 years. And I said, well, that's what we're focused on from a Silvertree perspective. And every CIO said, when you do that, you will change the market. All 10, it was unanimous. The third is the expectation and the hope that AI will allow them and us to move from a reactive operation to a proactive operation, as Brian indicated, such that they can focus more on how they bring greater value to the business versus managing the operations of IT. So back to you, Tony. Those were the unanimous outcomes from all 10 CIOs back in April of 23 when we had that summit. Back to you, Tony.
Yeah, thanks. Well, then, so David, from ServiceNow's perspective, how do you see AI impacting IT ops and how that is managed?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. And it's interesting. If we take a step back for a moment, we're talking about AI. AI is a very big topic right now in the marketplace, but AI has been around for quite a while, right? Almost a decade at this point. And it all started where we had machine learning and we had to have, individuals that were programming and doing data scientists. All of that's transitioned into chatbots, natural language understanding, and now this new thing called generative AI, which leverages these things called LLMs or large language models. In the pace of innovation, we're just now at the beginning. We're at the cusp of what we're going to see in the coming years around the transformation that generative AI is going to bring. Why is that important? Well, this is why organizations like Silvertree, like ScienceLogic and ServiceNow are needed by CXOs, because this technology is disruptive and they need to be able to leverage our expertise, our capabilities to help them transform. And when we think about AI and AI ops, right, that's where when services and operations teams, tools, and data are siloed, that's when departments are unable to actually act on the data and the information. That's when those security vulnerabilities actually get attacked that Brian was talking about earlier. Many customers ask us at ServiceNow, well, how do we deploy ServiceNow to maximize those results? And I can tell you we have some really fantastic results when you start to think about the impact AI ops can actually drive for customers. We have one customer that has reduced 93% of their high severity incidents by automating those back-end processes. We have another customer, and it's not about getting rid of talent, right? Richard, you just talked about the talent challenge that's in the marketplace. We have one customer that's redeployed 30% of their top talent to go focus on meaningful business impacts by automating those IT operational spaces. When we look at it from a ServiceNow perspective, there's really 6 steps. And it's founded in a couple of areas. One, process, applications, data, and security. But where do we start? Well, one, I'm sure many of us have heard of that thing called the CMDB, right? But we need to establish that central repository of where data and all that information resides in order to build those relationships in business services that Brian alluded to, right? And how do you start that? Well, one, you need to understand and define your data strategy before you initiate that CMDB. And once you have that defined data strategy, you can leverage both horizontal and top-down discovery capabilities, and utilizing partners like Science Logic in order to feed that information into ServiceNow, into that centralized CMDB, is important. Once you have that data, and now you have both the top-down approach and the horizontal, you can start to really see the business services, the impact of the underlying technology. And don't forget, we're not talking about just infrastructure that's within your four walls. That landscape has expanded to cloud services and other SaaS providers like Azure and Google and AWS. So you need to expand that horizon beyond that. Once you have that information centralized and you have that visibility, that's where AI, machine learning, and generative AI can actually be unlocked to really start to drive the process optimization, to drive those improvements in the organization and result in those impacts I just talked about in terms of 93% reduction in high priority incidents and being able to redeploy your top talent to address the critical aspects of your business. I don't know about you, Tony, but for me, that now puts AI into IT operations.
Yeah, David, I think we all know this intuitively that AI is nothing without data, of course, but I hear CEOs on calls saying, how do I get into AI? And some very big ideas and goals without a good understanding of it. So how should employees adapt? How organizationally should we change to adapt to take advantage of the AI opportunity?
It's a great question, Tony. And I was in Goa, India in October of last year, speaking to a forum of ServiceNow partners that operate in managed services. And it was really around reimagining managed services. And what we talked about is that organizational change management with respect to driving the impact of the individual. And what we've seen at ServiceNow is not just thinking about that customer experience, right? You really have to also take a step back and think about your employee experience and how you need to change both the internal and external experiences that you want to drive with an AI strategy. But again, it goes back to the data elements that we just talked about. However, if you don't have a strategy that is going to drive both your customer experience externally and your internal employee experience, you're going to create a service dichotomy. And that's going to actually disrupt and create poor customer experience. If your employee experience is poor and they continue to be marred in manual tasks and activities, and you're not leveraging AI to do case summarization, or you're not leveraging AI to summarize the chat experience that you just had with an external customer before it gets to a live agent, that agent or that service individual is now going to have to spend time reading and trying to understand what all just transpired. So AI is going to help us drive a level of productivity at the endpoint with our customers, but we also have to adopt it internally and have a strategy and a structure to drive that experience.
So Tony, Richard here, I'd like to pile on David. We talk a lot about technology, but I think the biggest challenge for an IT organization or an MSP working for an IT organization or the business is the organizational change management component. You know, we're working with a very sophisticated client, a very large attorney firm, and they get it. They understand that it's not about technology transformation, it's about organizational change and transformation. And that the power of the technology can only be realized if you focus in on the organizational change management component. And if you deal with the people issues, skills, future, all of those things that may impede the transformation, because people always care about the me issues. And so you can't just avoid that discussion. You need to confront that discussion and have a plan to deal with it. And I find if a IT leader is really serious about driving change and driving the future of IT services, they seriously need to think about bringing in a professional organizational change management facilitator such that they don't get hung up on the traditional, it's just about the technology mindset. No, it's really about the organizational change enabled by the technology. And by the way, most IT organizations, myself included, may not be the best at that. That's why we partner with experts that specialize in organizational change, because that's the key to realizing the future of IT services and what all this technology and capability that's emerging will enable. Back to you, Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So it's starting to bring this home now, Brian. So one last thought. So I hear CIOs asking us as service providers, how do I get best value? What's the value realization model? How do you think about value, defining and measuring value within IT organizations across the broader business as we move forward? Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Ryan, you're on mute.
Yes,
Hey.
always catching yourself on mute. Who doesn't do that nowadays, right? Where's the AI around that, Richard? Come on now. But to reiterate what Richard and David both said, right? You got to look at the basics around this stuff. When measuring value, I kind of ask, I almost want to ask the audience, how many of you actually measure value, first of all? And that's a very important question to ask, because when we look at value from an AI perspective, it's not just about how many things AI can find root cause to. It's about understanding the full expanded incident life cycle. What elements in that incident life cycle, detection time, response time, repair time, recovery time, mean time to repair, mean time between failures, mean time between service impacting incidents, how many of those measurements are actually being managed today? So when we're talking about value here, right, and adoption, it's not just about your IT team or your operations team pounding out incidents left and right, but actually trying to resolve issues. As David stated, manual repetitive work is a huge problem we have in our environments nowadays. Everybody wants to do the same thing over and over again. I'm actually working with a customer right now that literally dropped everything and said, all right, we need you to build us a automation practice. We have no clue how to manage ITSM properly. And they're a major MSP out in Australia. And I was kind of taken back a little bit, because here's this company that has all this management, all this experience, been in business for 50 years, didn't know how to do that. But that's okay. They admitted it. They finally came to reality. We need help measuring. And oddly enough, when it came down to measuring, they weren't measuring anything in the incident management lifecycle. So that's where the first step actually has to come. What is that? What are those manual pieces of work that are being done day in and day out that may be repeated over and over again? That's just wasting time. Some of those quick wins, those easy wins you can take just at automating some of that stuff. But what you're building there from an AI perspective is, remember I talked about foundation a little bit earlier and the basics, right? You first have to build the machine learned data. To get value from AI, you need clean data. Anytime a human being responds to an incident of any type, it's always going to be inaccurate. Well, I rebooted a machine. Why? Because it needed to be rebooted. I restarted service. Why? Because it needed to be reserviced. What about the 10,000 things that happen in the environment at lightning strike? At 2:01 a.m., 10,000 things happen in your environment to cause that CPU to go to 100%. What were those things actually doing in the environment that provided value to identify other opportunities to replace manual repetitive work? Now that manual repetitive work being replaced with automations provides you with machine learned information. We call it enrichment. That enrichment updates the incident, and you can use Science Logic and ServiceNow's AI Ops, combination of AI Ops and machine learning together, to actually start identifying problems in the environment. A perfect example around this is actually patching Windows machines. We all know that's just one of those tasks we all hate every single quarter, half year, whatever time you do it in, right? Patching the Windows machines always seems to leave some, remnants. A machine isn't, started correctly. You might have 4 or 5. Well, the answer usually is go reboot the machine. But what if you could start doing diagnostics automatically, identifying potential issues with log files, potential issues with different file systems, or anything else that might be affecting those patching sequences and might be affecting those machines? You then have the opportunity at lightning strike, when patching is all done, to basically state there's a problem now in the environment, and AI can filter through 10,000 different things, incidents, events, and so on between ServiceNow and Science Logic to basically pinpoint a probability factor of what might be your root cause. And that's where true value exists. What's my root cause? How fast can I get to that? But you first have to back it up and say, am I even measuring the expanded incident life cycle? And if you aren't, that's your first step.
Yeah, well, I have to move us along here. Like, I think I've heard it's the data, stupid.
That's correct. That's correct. Yep.
But you have created a picture in my mind of 4 interlocking circles, like a Venn diagram, that has AI and automation at the top, has data and observability at the bottom, has security over one side, and has governance and org change of the other. But in the center is applications, business services, and value. You sort of led me to this picture of where there are these segments that should be considered. But before we gather your last thoughts, the 3 panelists, I'd like to open it up. Alexandra, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, we have a question from John. We're looking to make the best decisions with the data we have. How do we emphasize procedures that expose and elaborate alternative points of view, analytic debates, devil's advocates, and others?
Yeah, anybody like to start on that? Very good question.
Well, actually, the first thing we do from our perspective, again, we run workshops, we do analysis with our customers, with many corporations, whether it be small mom and pop shop to a large organization. We first want to understand, what are your business outcomes and what are your challenges to get to your outcomes? Now, you may be asking for, how your data is aligned, or I want to get to a more efficient method. But first of all, again, I go back to the basics almost every single time. What are the basics and what are the challenges you're facing doing just that, right? Understanding that data is very important, getting a perspective on the data, but you first have to understand, why do you have these problems with your data? What are those challenges? And then the hard part about this is, for all managers, what are the sources of those challenges? And a lot of times it comes down to people, and sometimes you have to address those concerns. So the first step I always say is, let's look at that data and let's identify what are the outcomes we actually want to achieve with that data. And then look at what are the challenges we need to focus on. From there, identifying those sources, and then how do we resolve those sources, and what's our critical success factors going forward? Just looking at the data and providing context around the data is just one step. But again, it's really breaking down those silos and getting everybody to work together and kind of saying, yeah, I did it, my fault, I don't know what I'm doing. That's okay. Let's move forward now and increase the knowledge that we need to get this done.
Yeah, Tony, let me, I think a good best practice that we've seen, and it was recently occurred at a nonprofit, very large, multi-billion-dollar nonprofit, where they started with doing a data and information analysis assessment, understanding from the CEO down through the various consumers of information what their expectations were, and then understanding what the constraints were with providing and meeting those expectations, then understanding what the architectural component was to enable those constraints to be eliminated, and then what is the management practices of that data to enable those expectations to be met. So it wasn't one answer. It was a comprehensive assessment from top to bottom, and making sure that you understand what the consumers of the information that data provides is expecting. And then from that, assessing what is constraining the organization's ability from being able to enable that. And they have been very successful in transforming, and this is the IT organization, and we facilitated that from an assessment perspective, at changing the perception of IT, who was constraining the business from understanding how to use the data and information that was available to enabling the business, and driving a higher order business performance by simply understanding the power of the data and creating an environment for it to be used. And that same model can be done in an IT business operation as well as in a broader construct, wherever that may be. That is a very thoughtful and logical approach. And I could say this, without doing it, you may solve one problem, but you won't fix the end state that you want. You've got to look at it in a comprehensive way and understand how you have to change to take advantage of the data and manage the data to create the insights that the business needs to drive their business, whatever business process that is.
Yep.
And Tony, I know you're very familiar with that particular case study that I just articulated.
Well,
right?
I am, and I think the only thing I would add, and is providing that back in an understandable, consumable program that all executives can understand and buy into, because that's part of the change management, starting with everybody being bought in. So thank you. Alexandra, do we have another question?
Yes, we have a question from Chip. Understanding we're at the beginning of AI innovation more broadly and moving past the initial hype, where do you all see clear ROI and maybe less clear ROI for AI applications within IT services?
David, you look ready to go.
Yeah, I'll take a stab at this one. So ServiceNow, we were very early adopters of our own internal generative AI products and capabilities. We have a great CIO, Chris Betty, that is, loves to be on the bleeding edge of technologies to determine what are the potential value indicators of our own in-platform capabilities. Things that you need to consider, right? It's some of the traditional IT KPIs today. So mean time to resolution. What is the number of high priority incidents that are in your environment today? And look at those traditional IT KPIs that you may have internally and create your benchmark. And what we've seen internally from an IT perspective is a drastic reduction in mean time to restoration, leveraging AI capabilities. We've seen a tremendous reduction leveraging automation in terms of remediation activities in the reduction of those high priority severity incidents, as well as security and vulnerability risks, leveraging AI to understand what that threat potential could be, and then in driving remediation and automating remediation where appropriately utilizing machine learning and those other aspects. But again, the data foundation has to be there. I know we've spoken a lot about data. And then you're going to get to some of the softer KPI measures, which is ultimately employee productivity. And there you're going to have to work with finance and other individuals to really understand what are your financial metrics around employee productivity so you can understand what that benchmark baseline is. And then as you're deploying machine learning and AI capabilities, what is that impact to productivity within the organization? And those benchmarks up front need to be sound and very clearly articulated so that you can month over month, week over week, measure and report on the results of that AI investment in reducing or impacting those KPIs.
Yeah, good. Well, we're going into the speed dating round now as we're starting to run out of time. I know there's a couple more questions that are similar, and I know we do want to finish up with you giving a little advice. So 2 questions, Alexandra, could you give us those? And panelists, please keep to 30 seconds.
Sure. So with AI becoming more of a driving force in the world, do you believe cybersecurity insurance will become more important to many businesses? How do you see that playing out?
I'll start with that one and then hand it to Brian and David. I think cybersecurity insurance and the enterprise are going to be required to have a AI strategy that gives clients higher order of protection over time, right? Because the bad guys are going to take advantage of AI. So if we do not look at it from a zero trust perspective and how we take advantage of AI to combat the bad guys, then you're going to have difficulty securing cybersecurity insurance as an end user. So I think cybersecurity insurance is definitely going to require, and the insurance carriers, or as a guy who worked in the insurance industry for a few years, are going to require a comprehensive plan for enterprises over time as they understand the risk associated with it. So I would suggest that we all, whether we are an IT organization, a technology provider, or an MSP, we all understand that we have to be proactive in addressing this concern. So definitely it's coming your way.
I just want to capitalize on what you said there, Richard, because insurance in general is about underwriting a risk, right? So understanding that risk becomes paramount whenever we're looking at IT or AI ops or anything else, security included, right? So think about your car right now. I can go to Geico, I can go to State Farm, I can go to Allstate, I can go to all the major insurance carriers right now. And what do they have to offer me? If you download our app and let us watch you how you drive, your insurance rates will be lower. Think about that concept real quick with the service-centric AI approach. Building an AI service factory that includes security, you're lowering your risk to threats because you have a holistic view of your entire ecosystem. You have true observability. I could almost promise you, as we mature in AI and as everybody starts to deploy further observability ecosystems, and ServiceNow and ScienceLogic figure out better ways to collaborate around this as we mature ourselves in this area. We are definitely going to be working with those insurance companies to prove out that if you have a full AI service factory observability system that takes in consideration all security threats along with the infrastructure, your risk is going to be lower. So I see this as an opportunity for everybody to take a step forward and say, let's start helping those insurance companies actually minimize risk, because that's what underwriting insurance is all about. It's about identifying risk.
Hey,
Yeah,
and
that's right. We have to move along here. So, of course, there's a whole another world of privacy that comes into that, which we do not. That'll be another session.
Oh, all day long.
Thank you, Brian. One last thing I'm going to ask each of you gentlemen. What is the one thing that you would recommend to the audience that a small to medium size enterprise should consider to ensure they're well positioned in their evolution of IT services? Richard, can I go to you first?
Yeah, well, I think we somewhat touched upon it, but in summary, I would say think about the platform that you use to manage IT services as much as you do about the service provider. Think and understand the point of arrival that you want to achieve and how that platform will enable that. I'm meeting with the CEO, met with the CIO. We're having a big discussion next week, and the discussion with this CEO and CIO is all about how do I create a platform that I can integrate companies and operate effectively and combat the threat of AI. Also, think about how you take advantage of new technologies like pen testing that is AI driven, which is much lower cost than the traditional pen testing that you can run continuously to understand what your vulnerability is. And understand, as Brian indicated and David, how you manage data. I think one of the things CIOs, MSPs, and everyone need to think about is it's not just about the technology. We can talk about data management, we can talk about AI, but it's also understand from an organizational change management perspective what the new skills you need to have in-house and what skills you want to leverage from a partner ecosystem and a technology platform that enables you to transform your business continuously and bring the innovation to the business without disruption. And organizational change needs to be a key component of what CIOs and IT organizations of the future consider, because technology will require that.
Thank you for 6, Richard. That was.
I'm sorry.
Brian, one, please. We're out of time.
Yeah. So after working with all sorts of customers, I mean, one thing I've noticed is that every CIO I talk to wants an easy way out when it comes to adopting AI. They have very little budget for it. They have very little patience for it. They think, the comment I have, shouldn't the tool just do it, right? Bottom line is they don't want to put the time and effort into building out a full-blown AI service factory approach, right? But let's be real here. I mean, honestly, there's no magic solution, especially with AI getting more and more complex day by day. Right. Before diving into the AI stuff, let's take a step back, as David and Richard and you, Tony, have basically stated. Right? Look at the basics of your business. Whether you're a big shot service provider or just a regular mom and pop 4-store pizza chain, right? You've got to figure out what tools you're working with and how they're competing for data. Our security concerns get in the way. It's time to really break down those barriers. So when it comes to automating, simplifying, consolidating, and speeding things up, which doesn't seem simple, right? You've got to start by breaking down those data silos. You have to start breaking down those silos. Then get everybody on board with the specific business goals. As you notice, my answer almost to everything is, what are your business outcomes? What do you want to achieve by doing this first? And then let's identify the challenges and the sources of those challenges. Almost a formula I follow every single time. And David follows, and Richard, and we all follow together in providing analysis to our customers. Once you do that, you get those silos broken down. It's not like the old days where the CIO's job was just to keep the lights on, right? I remember at Kellogg, I'm going to give you $60 million to keep the lights on. Well, that changed in a second when cloud hit, right?
Brian,
Go ahead.
that was more than
We
30
out of
seconds.
time?
All right, Tony, I know I'm on the clock.
You get one sentence, David.
One sentence.
Oh my gosh. So I'm going to finish with a 4x3. So I already talked about process, applications, data, security. That's 4, right? On the process side, a fool with a tool is still a fool. So if you don't stop and think about your processes first, then look at the applications, then understand the data structure, and then security to wrap around that, that's where I would focus if I were in your shoes. Don't just start with the technology, right? The technology is not going to solve your problem. And then the 3 is ultimately continue to be customer focused. I think if you keep that in the forefront of your mind, you will be successful with the 4 up front. Be proactive and then be innovative. Because if you're not those 3 final things, your competition will outpace you.
Absolutely.
Good visual there. David, thank you, everybody. I want to hand back to our host today. I want to thank our panelists for doing a good job and keeping to time. And I'll hand back to Alexandra and our team. Alex?
Yeah, thank you so much, Tony, and thank you to our panelists for this awesome discussion. Thank you as well to Silvertree for sponsoring this session today. As I mentioned before, the session has been recorded, so I'll send a recording out to all registrants later today. If you have any questions about NC Tech, please go to nctech.org and also view our events calendar for more programs like this and other events also at nctech.org. But with that, I will conclude today's session. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll hope to see you all soon.